Felix's voice cracked through the storm as his hand closed around Hyunjin's wrist. The apartment door stood open behind them, letting cold rain spray across the wooden floor. Hyunjin froze halfway through the doorway, his black coat already soaked at the shoulders, a suitcase resting beside his leg. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Felix's chest rose and fell violently. Hyunjin looked at the hand around his wrist, then slowly lifted his eyes. Go. Words quiet. But they hurt more than the shouting that had filled the apartment only minutes earlier. Felix swallowed. No. Hyunjin's jaw tightened. Felix. No. You don't get to decide that anymore. The sentence struck harder than Felix expected. His fingers loosened slightly, but he refused to release him. Rain whispered against the windows. Somewhere outside, a car passed through the wet street, its headlights sliding briefly across their faces. Felix could see the exhaustion beneath Hyunjin's eyes. He could also see the anger. And beneath the anger, something far more frightening hurt. Not leaving because I stopped caring about you, Hyunjin said. Then why are you leaving? Because caring about you is destroying me. When still, the words seemed to drain all the warmth from the room. Hyunjin pulled his wrist free. I tried, he whispered. For months I tried to convince myself that I could stay beside you without wanting something you were never ready to give. Stared at him. What did you want? Hyunjin laughed bitterly. You really don't know. No, that's the problem. Picked up his suitcase. Felix stepped in front of the doorway. Then tell me. Hyunjin looked at him for a long moment. I wanted you to stop pretending that I was just your best friend. Breath caught. The silence that followed felt enormous. Hyunjin turned away. I'm tired, Felix. His voice was barely audible now. I'm tired of waiting for you to understand what you mean to me. Closed his eyes. The truth he had spent months hiding suddenly felt impossible to contain. Because Hyunjin was right. He had known. Every time Hyunjin stayed awake beside him when he couldn't sleep. Every time he remembered how Felix took his coffee. Every time Hyunjin silently moved closer whenever Felix looked overwhelmed. Every time jealousy burned inside him when someone else made Hyunjin laugh, Felix had known. He had simply been terrified of saying it, not because he didn't love Hyunjin. Because he loved him too much. Hyunjin. Hyunjin stopped. Felix's voice trembled. I'm scared. Hyunjin slowly turned around. Of what? Losing you. You're losing me because you never had the courage to hold on. Flinched. I know. Hyunjin's expression changed. For the first time, his anger cracked. Felix stepped closer. I know I hurt you, Felix. I know I made you think you were alone in this. His eyes burned. You were never alone. Hyunjin stared at him. Felix took another step. I was just a coward. The rain grew heavier. Felix's fingers curled against his palms. I thought if I told you how I felt, everything would change. It already changed. I know. Now Felix looked directly into his eyes. Now I'd rather lose everything by telling you the truth than keep you by lying. Hyunjin said nothing. Felix's voice became softer. I love you. Hyunjin's lips parted. I love you, Felix repeated. And I should have told you before tonight, before every argument, before every stupid silence. Before you packed that suitcase. Hyunjin looked away. A tear escaped before he could hide it. Felix moved closer but stopped before touching him. I'm not asking you to forgive me tonight. His voice shook. Only asking you not to leave while I'm finally brave enough to love you. Hyunjin covered his mouth with one hand. For a moment, Felix thought he might still walk away. Instead, Hyunjin whispered, why did you wait until I was leaving? Because sometimes people don't understand what they're holding until they're terrified of losing it. Hyunjin lowered his hand. You're an idiot, gave a broken laugh. I know, you hurt me. I know, I don't trust you yet. I know. Hyunjin stared at him. And you still expect me to stay? No, shook his head. I expect nothing. Stepped aside from the doorway. If you stay, I promise I'll spend every day proving that I meant what I said. Hyunjin looked at the open door, then at the suitcase, then back at Felix. The storm continued outside. Slowly, Hyunjin reached for the suitcase handle. Felix held his breath. Hyunjin pulled the suitcase away from the door, not toward the hallway, toward the apartment. Felix's eyes widened. Hyunjin walked past him without saying anything. He placed the suitcase beside the couch and sat down. Felix remained frozen near the doorway. Hyunjin finally looked up. The door blinked. What? The rain is getting inside. A shaky smile appeared on Felix's face. He closed the door, but neither of them pretended that closing it meant everything was suddenly fixed. The argument had left scars. Trust would not return in a single night. Love would not magically erase every fear. So they sat several feet apart in the quiet apartment, listening to the storm slowly weaken outside. After several minutes, Hyunjin spoke. "You really love me?" Felix looked at him. "More than I know how to explain." Hyunjin lowered his gaze. "I've loved you for a long time." Felix's heart ached. "I know that now." "No," Hyunjin whispered. "You don't." Looked up. "I loved you when you were impossible, when you were stubborn, when you disappeared into your own head and refused to tell anyone what was wrong." A faint smile appeared. "I loved you when you stole my hoodies and denied it." Laughed softly. "I never stole them. You still have 6. That's different." Hyunjin smiled. For the first time that night the tension eased. But then Hyunjin's expression became serious again. "There's something else." Smile disappeared. "What?" Hyunjin hesitated. "The reason I was really going to leave." Waited. Hyunjin reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I found this 2 weeks ago." Took it. His eyes moved across the page, then stopped. It was a photograph, a picture of Felix and Hyunjin leaving the studio together. On the back, someone had written a single sentence. "You think your secrets belong only to you." Felix's stomach dropped. "Who gave you this?" "I don't know." "Days ago, another one appeared in my locker." Looked at him. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was afraid. Of me, of what would happen if I did." Turned the photograph over again. His fingers trembled. Hyunjin watched him. "That's why I wanted to leave." Slowly looked up. "Someone has been watching us." "And you thought leaving would make you safe." "I thought putting distance between us would make you safe." Stared at him. Hyunjin's voice broke. "I couldn't stand the thought that something might happen to you because of me." Felix crossed the room and sat beside him. "You should never have carried this alone." "I didn't know who to trust." "You can trust me." Hyunjin looked at him. "I want to." Reached for his hand. This time Hyunjin let him. Their fingers intertwined. Outside, the storm finally began to fade. But neither of them noticed the dark figure standing across the street. The figure watched the apartment window for several seconds before lowering a phone. On the screen was a photograph of Felix and Hyunjin holding hands. A new message appeared. They stayed together. The reply came almost immediately. "Then it's time to make them regret it." The next morning, Felix woke to find Hyunjin asleep beside him on the couch. For a moment, everything felt normal. Sunlight slipped through the curtains. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee. Hyunjin's fingers were still loosely wrapped around Felix's. Felix smiled. Then his phone vibrated. One message. Unknown number. "You should have let him leave." Felix stared at the screen. Another message arrived. "Because now both of you are targets." His smile disappeared. He looked at Hyunjin. Hyunjin opened his eyes. "What happened?" Felix didn't answer immediately. He turned the phone toward him. Hyunjin read the message. The color slowly drained from his face. Neither spoke. Then Hyunjin whispered, "Felix, I know." "What are we going to do?" Felix looked toward the window. The city outside seemed completely ordinary. People walked along the sidewalks. Cars moved through the intersection. The morning sun reflected off glass buildings. Everything looked safe. But Felix knew better now. He tightened his grip on Hyunjin's hand. "We stay together." Hyunjin stared at him. "Even if it gets dangerous," Felix nodded. "Especially then." Days passed. The messages stopped. That frightened them more than the threats. Silence became its own kind of warning. Felix began checking the locks twice every night. Hyunjin started watching reflections in windows. They stopped walking the same routes home. Their friends noticed the change but received only vague explanations. Neither Felix nor Hyunjin wanted anyone else dragged into the situation. Yet the pressure slowly changed them. Felix became more protective. Hyunjin became more distant. They loved each other, but fear followed them everywhere. One evening, Felix returned home and found the apartment door unlocked. His heart stopped. "Hyunjin?" No answer. He stepped inside. The lights were off. The apartment was silent. "Hyunjin?" His phone rang. He answered immediately. A distorted voice whispered through the speaker. "You wanted him to stay." Felix's blood turned cold. "Where is he? You should have let him go." "Is Hyunjin?" A soft laugh. "Look outside." Rushed toward the window across the street. A black car was parked beneath a broken street lamp. The back door opened. Hyunjin stepped out. Felix's heart nearly stopped. "Hyunjin?" Hyunjin looked up. Their eyes met through the glass. Then the car sped away. Felix ran downstairs. He reached the street just as the car disappeared around the corner. His chest burned, his phone rang again. Felix. Hyunjin's voice. Felix froze. Where are you? Safe. Happened. I followed someone. I think I know who it is. Felix's pulse raced. Who? Silence. Then Hyunjin whispered a name. Felix knew it immediately. Someone they had trusted, someone who had been close to them for years, someone who knew almost everything about their relationship. Felix closed his eyes. No, sorry, you could be wrong. I hope I am. Tightened his grip on the phone. Where are you? I'll send you the location. Don't move. Don't move. He ended the call and ran. When he reached the location, he found Hyunjin standing alone beneath an old railway bridge. The air smelled of rain and rust. You shouldn't have come, Hyunjin said. Felix approached him. You shouldn't have gone alone. I had to know. What? Hyunjin handed him a phone. On the screen were dozens of photographs. Felix and Hyunjin at the studio, at restaurants, outside their apartment during rehearsals, laughing, arguing, holding hands, sleeping in the car. Every private moment they thought belonged only to them. Felix's stomach twisted. How long? Months. Hyunjin's voice trembled. They've been watching us for months. Looked at the final photograph. It had been taken only hours earlier. It showed Felix sleeping beside Hyunjin on the couch. The angle was impossible. Someone had taken it from inside their apartment. Felix slowly looked around. Then they're still close. Hyunjin nodded. We need to leave. No, Hyunjin stared at him. Felix looked at the photograph again. Running is exactly what they want. Then what do you suggest? Felix's eyes hardened. Find out why. They returned home before midnight. For the first time, they searched the apartment together, behind the bookshelf, inside the vents, under furniture, near the windows. Then Hyunjin noticed something. A tiny red light beneath the edge of a cabinet. He crouched. Felix knelt beside him. A camera. Hyunjin's face went pale. Felix carefully removed it. His phone immediately vibrated. Unknown number. You finally found it. Felix stared at the message. Then another appeared. Now find the person who put it there. The message contained an address. Felix and Hyunjin exchanged a look. They knew the place. It was an old studio building they had stopped using months ago. They went there together. The building smelled of dust and damp concrete. Every footstep echoed. Hyunjin stayed close to Felix. You're shaking, Felix whispered. Are you? I'm allowed. So am I. Felix smiled faintly. They reached the final room. The door was unlocked. Inside, hundreds of photographs covered the walls. Their entire history was there. The first rehearsal, their first argument, their first trip together, moments neither of them remembered being photographed. Felix felt sick. At the center of the room was a table. On it sat two envelopes. One had Felix's name. The other had Hyunjin's. Hyunjin opened his first. His expression changed. What? He handed the letter to Felix. The message contained only one sentence. He never told you what happened that night. Felix looked at Hyunjin. What night? Hyunjin didn't answer. Hyunjin looked away. There's something I never told you. Waited. Before we became close, someone threatened me. Felix's expression hardened. Who? I don't know. Why didn't you tell me? Because I thought it was over. Now, Hyunjin looked at the photographs. Now I think it never was. Stepped closer. What happened? Hyunjin took a slow breath. The night you first told me you were afraid of losing me, his eyes filled with tears. I received a message telling me that if I ever confessed how I felt about you, you would disappear from my life. Stared at him. You believed them. I was afraid. You carried that all this time. Hyunjin nodded. Felix's anger softened. He reached out and touched his cheek. You should have told me. I know. I would have stayed. Hyunjin closed his eyes. I know that now. A sudden crash came from the hallway. Both of them turned. The lights went out. Hyunjin grabbed Felix's hand. Stay close. Footsteps echoed outside, slow, deliberate. Someone stopped outside the room. The door began to open. Felix instinctively stepped in front of Hyunjin. But when the figure entered, neither of them moved. It was someone they knew, someone they trusted, someone who had been watching them from the beginning. The person looked at them with tears in their eyes. I never wanted this to go this far. Stared. Then why did you do it? Because I thought I was protecting you. Hyunjin stepped forward. You destroyed everything. I know. Person looked at Felix. Because I knew what would happen if you two admitted the truth. Felix's voice was cold. What would happen? The answer came quietly. Someone would come back. Filled the room. Hyunjin's expression changed. Who? The person lowered their eyes. The person who caused everything in the first place. Felt a chill move through him. Where are they? A tear rolled down the person's cheek. They're already here. The lights suddenly returned, the room was empty, the person had disappeared through a second door. Felix ran after them, but the corridor was empty. Hyunjin stood behind him. Felix. He turned. Hyunjin was holding something, a photograph, a recent one. On the back was a final message. You wanted a reason to stay, now you have one. Felix took the photograph. It showed the two of them standing together beneath the railway bridge. Taken only minutes earlier, he looked at Hyunjin. For the first time, neither of them was afraid of what the other might say. Felix reached for his hand. Hyunjin held it. Not running, Felix whispered. Hyunjin nodded. More secrets. No more lies. No more leaving. Smiled faintly. Especially that. Hyunjin leaned his forehead against Felix's. I still don't know what's going to happen. Neither do I. What if we're not safe? Felix closed his eyes. Then we'll face it together. Hyunjin's fingers tightened around his. For months, fear had taught them to hide. That night, love taught them something different. Not that love could protect them from every danger. Not that pain would disappear. Not that trust could be rebuilt overnight. But that staying was sometimes the bravest choice two frightened people could make. Outside, the first light of dawn began to touch the city. Felix looked at Hyunjin. I almost let you leave. Hyunjin smiled sadly. But you didn't. No, squeezed his hand. I won't make that mistake again. Hyunjin looked at him for a long moment, then he leaned closer. Good. The kiss was quiet, not dramatic, not perfect, just honest. And for the first time since their worst argument, Felix no longer felt as though he was holding on to something that might disappear. He was simply holding Hyunjin, and Hyunjin was choosing to stay. Whatever waited beyond that morning, they would face it together. Because sometimes love didn't begin when two people confessed. Sometimes it began when one of them finally stopped running. And sometimes, after the worst fight of their lives, the most important words were also the simplest. Don't leave. I'm here. I love you.
The kiss ended slowly, but neither Felix nor Hyunjin moved away. Their foreheads remained together. For a few seconds, the abandoned studio disappeared from their minds. There was no hidden camera, no threatening message, no photograph taken from the shadows, only the warmth of Hyunjin's breath and the trembling fingers still intertwined with Felix's. Then Felix opened his eyes. We need to go. Hyunjin nodded. Together. They left the studio before sunrise. The city was still wrapped in pale blue darkness, street lights reflecting against puddles left by the storm. Their footsteps echoed along the empty sidewalk as they walked side by side. Neither spoke for several minutes. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the silence of two people trying to understand how much had changed in a single night. Felix occasionally glanced at Hyunjin. Every time he did, Hyunjin noticed. You keep looking at me. Smiled. Making sure you're still here. Hyunjin lowered his eyes. You really were that afraid I'd leave? Yes. Why? Felix stopped walking. Hyunjin stopped too. Felix looked at him beneath the weak morning light. Because I've spent so long pretending I didn't need you that I forgot how terrifying it would be if you actually disappeared. Hyunjin's expression softened. You should have said that sooner. I know. You always say that. Because it's usually true. Hyunjin laughed quietly. It was the first genuine laugh Felix had heard from him in days. Felix smiled, then Hyunjin reached for his hand. This time he did it without hesitation. Their fingers intertwined, they continued walking, but neither of them noticed the figure watching from the opposite side of the street. The stranger stood beneath a dark umbrella. A phone rested against one ear. They're together, the stranger said. A pause, then the voice on the other end replied. Them be. Stranger frowned. Are you sure? Yes. Why? A quiet laugh came through the phone. Because if they stay together, they'll eventually lead us to the truth. The call ended. The stranger lowered the phone, then disappeared into the morning crowd. By the time Felix and Hyunjin returned to the apartment, the sun had fully risen. Felix unlocked the door. Before entering, he stopped. Hyunjin looked at him. What? Felix stared at the lock. It was locked when we left. Hyunjin's expression changed. So, I always lock it twice. You did last night. I know. Slowly pushed the door open. Nothing appeared disturbed. The furniture was exactly where they had left it. The curtains were still closed. The photographs on the shelf remained untouched, yet something felt wrong. Hyunjin entered carefully. Felix followed. They searched the rooms, nothing. Then Hyunjin stopped near the kitchen. What? He pointed toward the counter. 2 cups of coffee were sitting there, still warm. Felix's blood ran cold. Neither of them had made coffee. Hyunjin slowly stepped backward. Someone was here. Reached for his phone. Before he could call anyone, the screen lit up. Unknown number. Don't be afraid. Felix stared at the words. Another message appeared. I only wanted you to understand. Hyunjin came closer. Understand what? A third message arrived, that not everyone who protects you is your friend. Felix's expression hardened. He typed a reply. Who are you? The message showed as delivered. No answer came. Then Felix noticed something beneath the phone, a tiny white envelope. His name was written across it. His hands became cold. He opened it. Inside was a photograph. It was old, much older than the recent pictures. Felix stared at it. It showed himself and Hyunjin standing outside their first practice building. They were younger, smiling. Neither knew they were being photographed. On the back, someone had written a date, 3 years ago. Hyunjin read it over Felix's shoulder. That's the day we first met. Nodded. But why would someone have this? Hyunjin turned the photograph over. There was another sentence. You were never supposed to become this close. Hyunjin went completely still. Felix looked at him. Do you remember that day? Of course. Happened. Hyunjin frowned. Nothing. Think. Hyunjin closed his eyes. I was nervous. You always are before important things. I kept dropping my water bottle. Smiled faintly. You spilled it on my shoes. You still remember that? I remember everything about you. Hyunjin opened his eyes. For a moment, the fear disappeared. Then something returned to his face, a memory. Wait, what? Hyunjin walked toward the bookshelf. He pulled out an old notebook. The cover was worn and faded. Felix recognized it immediately. You still have that? Hyunjin nodded. I keep things. You keep everything. Only things that matter. Watched him open the notebook. Several pages were filled with old rehearsal schedules, names, dates, notes. Then Hyunjin stopped. His finger rested on a handwritten entry. Felix leaned closer. What is it? Hyunjin swallowed. The day we met. The date was a short note. Someone came to the building asking about Felix. Felix's smile disappeared. Don't remember. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't know about it. Hyunjin turned another page. There was another note and another. Someone had apparently been asking questions about Felix long before either of them realized it. Felix sat down. His mind raced. Why me? I don't know. You recognize the name. Hyunjin shook his head. There isn't a name. Then how did you know it was about me? Because your name was written here. Looked at the page. His full name was written in Hyunjin's handwriting. Underneath it was a sentence. Ask about the boy who never talks about his family. Felix's face changed. Hyunjin noticed. Felix, he said nothing. Felix, what does that mean? Felix stared at the words. There was something he had never told Hyunjin, something he had buried so deeply that even he rarely allowed himself to remember it. Family. Hyunjin waited. Felix looked down. There was someone who used to know my family. Who? I don't know if they're still alive. Hyunjin moved closer. Tell me. Felix's fingers tightened around the notebook. Father had a business partner. Hyunjin remained silent. They had a falling out when I was young. Happened. I never knew the whole story. Why? Because whenever I asked, my mother changed the subject. Looked toward the window. She told me never to search for that person. Why? She said some people become dangerous when they think you've forgotten them. Hyunjin's expression tightened. And you think this is connected? I don't know. But you're afraid it is. Nodded. He hated admitting it. For years, he had convinced himself that the past was finished, that whatever secrets his family had carried belonged to another time. But now someone was watching him. Someone knew about Hyunjin. Someone had access to their apartment. Someone knew things that should have remained private. And the oldest photograph had been taken on the very day they met. Hyunjin reached for Felix's hand. You don't have to face this alone. Looked at him. I know. Do you? Felix smiled faintly. I'm learning. Hyunjin squeezed his hand. They spent the rest of the morning going through the notebook. Piece by piece, they reconstructed the past. There were missing pages, old names crossed out, several dates circled repeatedly. One location appeared more than any other, an old warehouse near the river. Felix recognized it. Father used to work there. Hyunjin looked at him. You're sure? Yes. I was born. They exchanged a glance. Neither wanted to say what they were thinking. Finally, Felix stood. We should go there. Hyunjin immediately shook his head, not without telling someone. Stopped. You're right. Was unusual enough that Hyunjin smiled. What? You agreed with me. I can do that occasionally. I'm impressed. Hyunjin rolled his eyes. They contacted someone they trusted and explained only enough to ensure that someone knew where they were going. Then they left. A warehouse stood near the river, surrounded by rusted fences and abandoned buildings. The air smelled of wet metal and mud. Wind pushed through broken windows. Felix stood outside for several seconds. I haven't been here since I was a kid. Hyunjin looked at him. Do you remember anything? A little. What? My father used to bring me here. Stepped inside. Dust covered the concrete floor. Old machinery sat beneath torn sheets. Every sound echoed. Hyunjin stayed close. Felix walked toward the far wall. Then stopped. There was a faded marking on the concrete, a small circle crossed by two lines. Hyunjin noticed it. What is that? I don't know. Touched it. His fingers brushed against something hidden beneath the paint. He pulled. A small metal key came loose. Hyunjin stared. What's it for? Felix looked around. I don't know. They searched the warehouse. Near the back was an old metal cabinet. One lock remained intact. Felix inserted the key. It turned. Inside was a box. The box contained documents, old contracts. Photographs, letters. Felix began reading. His face slowly changed. Hyunjin moved beside him. What did you find? Felix handed him a document. Hyunjin read it, then looked at Felix. This is your father's signature. Nodded. This. Hyunjin pointed toward another name. Felix's heart dropped. He recognized it. It belonged to the person who had been secretly asking about him years ago, the same person who had apparently been connected to his family. The same person whose presence had somehow followed him into adulthood. Hyunjin turned another page. There was a photograph. 3 people stood outside the warehouse. Felix's father, another man, and a woman. Hyunjin stared at the woman. Felix. Know her. Looked up sharply. You do. Hyunjin's voice was barely audible. She was at the studio. When? Recently. Took the photograph. His heart began pounding. Who is she? Hyunjin looked terrified. She was the person who gave me the first message. Silence. Felix stared at the photograph. The mystery suddenly became larger than either of them had expected. But for the first time, he didn't feel alone. Hyunjin stood beside him, their shoulders touched. Felix looked at him. Whatever happens, Hyunjin met his eyes. We face it together. Nodded. And this time, neither of them doubted the promise. They returned home after sunset. The city lights shimmered through the windows. The apartment was quiet. Felix placed the old box on the table. Hyunjin made tea. It was an ordinary gesture, something small, something comforting. When he returned, Felix was staring at the photograph. Hyunjin placed a cup beside him. You're thinking too much. I do that. I know. Looked at him. Stay. Hyunjin sat down. Here. Reached for his hand. The fear was still there. The questions were still unanswered. The past was still waiting. But for tonight, they didn't need every answer. They only needed each other. Hyunjin leaned against Felix's shoulder. Felix rested his cheek against Hyunjin's hair. Outside, the city continued moving. Inside, the two of them sat quietly, holding on to the fragile piece they had finally found. Neither knew how much the truth would change them. But they knew one thing. Whatever came next, they would no longer run from it separately. They would face it side by side. And for Felix, that was enough.